Good morning. This is module 2. Title of this module is Features of a Corpus. This module describes the features of a general corpus as well as argues that a text database should possess all these features to be considered as a corpus in the true sense. In this module, we describe the basic introduction, then identify the features, quality, quantity, representation, simplicity, equality, retrievability, verifiability, augmentation, documentation, and management. Finally, we have the conclusion. Let's start. Corpus can be of many types. A general corpus is assumed to have certain default features. A corpus which does not possess one or more default features of a general corpus should be identified as a special corpus which deviates from a general corpus. By all means, a general corpus, if it is not defined otherwise, should possess the following features, and these features include quantity of data, quality of data, representations of texts, equality in text amount, simplicity in texts, retrievability of texts from this, verifiability of information included in the text, augmentation of texts whenever required, documentations of text in all proper manners, and the management of text resources for the users. Each feature is defined in some details in this module. First, the quantity. When we generate a corpus, the question is that how big it will be, means how big the corpus will be. That means how many words will be there in a corpus. The answer is not simple as it appears, because it is neither possible nor sensible to prescribe any fixed number for such question. We say that the bigger is the corpus, the better is its authenticity and reliability. In essence, the number of words included in a corpus will determine its largeness. Since the primary goal of a corpus building project is to include as many evidences, as many sentences as possible, we are not in a position to restrict a corpus designer with any fixed mark of word or sentence unit to be considered for the corpus. The default value of quantity signifies that it should be large with regard to the number of words and sentences included in it. A corpus is assumed to contain a large number of words and sentences, since the basic point of assembling a corpus is to gather data from varieties of source texts in large quantity. Present technology allows us to increase the size of a corpus quite rapidly, and therefore it is not right to recommend any set of figures. Furthermore, the recent advent of a monitor corpus, a new concept, has effectively, remarkably, the concept of the size, which refers to the calculation of rate of flow of words rather than the total amount of words used in the corpus. If we still consider quantity of a corpus in terms of size, it will refer to the sum of the total linguistic components included in it. Thus, the question of quantity or size is best addressed with reference to components. The size of quantity reflects indirectly on the simplicity or complexities involved in the process of acquiring text materials. This is again loosely related to the issue of availability of materials of a language for general access, which again reflects on the relative importance of an influential language over a non-influential one. Most often, contrary to those widely used languages like English and French, materials of less resourced languages become difficult to procure because less resourced languages have comparatively less circulation than widely circulated ones. In case of Indian languages, it is noted that some socio-culturally rich languages like Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Bangla, Punjabi, Marathi, Gujarati, Oriya, Konkani, etc. supply large amount of text materials. Such materials are hardly found in less resourced Indian languages such as Mundari, Santali, Sadri and others. Obviously, these languages are not able to provide text samples belonging to diverse fields of and disciplines of language use. The number of words is not a faithful cue, however, to understand the features of a corpus. One can collect large amount of words from dictionaries, thesauri, word books, and similar other sources to claim it as a corpus. However, this is not a corpus since the collection fails to represent the basic texture of use of a language. To overcome this problem, it is better to collect texts from various written and spoken discourses. Advantage of this method lies in its way of gradual increment of the number of sentence types, which automatically ensure the normal growth and variety of words in a corpus. Therefore, in our argument, the issue of quantity should be envisaged with regard to technology of the time. That means, the quantity of words should be measured with respect to availability of technology which is used to produce the corpus. When the work of corpus generation started in the second half of the last century, computer technology was not much advanced as we find it today. Therefore, collection of marginal amount of words in computer was really a tough task. In those early years of electronic corpus generation, the Brown corpus, which contained just 1 million words, was considered to be a standard one, which was developed in 1961. Since at that particular time, collection of 1 million words in electronic form was unthinkable for most of the linguists. In later years, however, when computer went through metamorphosis to be gifted with unprecedented power of storage and processing, small corpora are replaced by large corpora. Within a few years, new corpora are developed which contain more than 20 million words. When the Birmingham collection of English texts is compiled in 1985, it contained more than 20 million words. In the last decade of the last century, the number of words in the Bank of English reached to 200 million words, still being open for further increment. On the other hand, linguists who are working with corpus also realize that a collection of 1 million words is not at all reliable resource to make any faithful observation on any aspect of a language. The need for a corpus of at least 100 million words to validate their arguments and hypotheses. In the new millennium, we are not even satisfied with a corpus containing 100 million words only. For instance, the British National Corpus has reached to the stage of 100 million plus words within the last few years. It still grows with daily doses of data coming from various sources and fields. Collection of words from those languages which enjoy facilities of electronic devices is much higher than those languages which are not having these facilities. That means the techno-savvy languages have better scope for generation of corpora than non-techno-savvy languages. Techno-savvy languages, due to certain socio-economic, political-cultural, and commercial and scientific reasons, enjoy both global patronage and technical support. Therefore, ability to text in electronic form in those languages is much higher than others, quite obvious. Also, the Roman script that is used for most of the languages contributes to a great extent to the global expansion. On the contrary, the languages which have not large resources in electronic form have little scope for generation of corpus easily. Even if we keep aside languages of the backward and underdeveloped countries or communities, we find that resources in electronic form available in Indian languages like Bangla, Telugu or Tamil, etc. are not even 1/10 of the resources available for languages like English, Spanish, German, French, etc. Although the number of speakers in Indian languages is not less than those of Western languages. The truth is that facilities of electronic medium are not yet accessed properly by languages of India as it has been enjoyed by the languages of advanced countries. Therefore, it is not surprising if we find that the number of electronic corpora in Indian languages is less than those of advanced countries. Next feature, quality. The default quality feature, the default value of quality relates to authenticity. That means all text materials should be collected from genuine communications of people doing their normal activities. Our role as corpus collector is limited to acquiring data for the purpose of corpus generation, which in return will protect interest of people who will make statements about the way language is used in communication. We have no right to alter, modify or distort the actual image of the language data we collect. Also, we have no right to add information from our personal observation on the ground that the data is not large enough or suitable enough to represent the language for which it is made. The basic point is that we shall collect data quite faithfully, following the predefined principles proposed for the work. If we try to interpolate in any way within the body of the text, we shall not only damage the actual picture of the text, but also shall tell upon heavily on subsequent analysis of the data. This will affect on overall projection of the language, or worse, may yield wrong observations about the language in question. Our strategic alienation from corpus manipulation will restrain us from including language texts obtained from experimental conditions or artificial circumstances. Although it may appear difficult to draw a line of distinctions between the two types. For instance, consider the data collected from recordings of conversations broadcast in radio or television. Apparently, it may appear that texts found in those sources have nothing abnormal or artificial quality, since these are broadcast as these are conversed and recorded. But the truth is, these texts are quite drawn away from actual reality. In most cases, most of these conversations are chiseled and processed in studio before these are delivered for broadcasting or telecasting to the target audience. Therefore, we have objections for considering these texts as natural and normal or spontaneous sounds, since most of the qualities of impromptu conversations are lost in these texts. In the context of a general corpus, such corpus is of secondary importance to us, as it loses most of the interactional properties normally observed in casual and informal talks. However, such corpora have spatial importance and functional relevance as spatial corpus that includes samples from artificial and build-up situations. We can consider this for some other research work and some other tasks, not for a general purpose. Furthermore, in extreme situation, some television shows deliberately try to put participants in an artificial condition to elicit odd responses. On the other hand, casual conversations are extended to be impromptu in nature for the purpose of catchy presentation. But these are rehearsed by the participants before their talks are circulated. It is therefore required that experts should seriously intervene in all such situations, else the data of special interactions will not be allowed to be included in a general corpus. However, for special works, these may be tagged as experimental corpora, which, like special corpora, have specific functional relevance in linguistic discussions. Third feature, text representation. A corpus should include texts from a wide range of materials in order to attain proper representation. It should be balanced to all disciplines and subject fields to represent the maximum number of linguistic features found in a language. Besides, it should be authentic in representation of text variety wherefore it is developed, since analysis and investigation of texts ask for verification and authentication of information from corpus representing the language. For example, if you want to develop a Hindi text corpus which is adequately representative of the language, we should keep in mind that we need to collect data both from written and spoken texts in equal proportion so that the corpus becomes a true replica of the language. This is the first condition of text representation. Complications, however, may arise in subsequent stages. For instance, if we need to develop a speech corpus for Hindi, the question that will arise is, from which sectors and which fields we are supposed to collect speech data? Should we include only the text from family interactions? Should we include data from speech events that occur at courts and police stations, offices and clubs, schools and colleges, playgrounds and cinema halls, shopping malls and marketplaces, roads and pubs, etc.? The answer is already embedded within the question. We need to collect texts from all possible sources of spoken interactions, irrespective to their place, time, situation of occurrence, and from all types of people, irrespective of their sex, age, class, caste, education, or profession. Only then a speech corpus can be representative in the true sense of the term. Almost similar argument stands for a written text corpus. Samples should be collected from all sources. They should be maximally representative with regard to demographic variables. A written corpus should contain text not only from imaginative writings like fictions, novels, and stories. It must include samples from informative prose texts like natural science, social science, medical science, engineering, technology, commerce, banking, earth science, advertisements, posters, newspapers, personal letters, government notices, diaries, and many other similar sources. To be truly representative, text should be collected in equal proportion from all sources, irrespective of text types, genres, and time variations. In the long run, however, the question of size becomes irrelevant in the context of text representation. A large corpus does not necessarily imply to represent a language or a language variety any better than a small but properly balanced corpus. A simple large collection of any text is not necessarily a corpus wherefrom we can make a generalization. According to Leach, we can call a corpus representative only when findings based on analysis on it can be generalized to the language as a whole or a specified part of it. Therefore, rather than focusing on quantity of data, it is always better to emphasize a variety of data represented proportionally from all possible domains of language use. The issues which are related to balance and text representation are also linked with some empirical issues. Even a corpus of 100 million words may appear too small when compared with total amount of texts from which it is sampled. Summers shows how the difference in content and language of a particular text type influence linguistic analysis at subsequent stages, because the original prose purpose of the text plays a vital role in drawing up inferences. Thus, on the basis of empirical observations, Summers argues for adopting a sampling approach by way of which using the notion of broad range of objectively defined document or text types as its main organizing principle. To achieve the goal of a text representation, she has outlined a number of possible principles for the selection of written text samples. These may be summarized in the following way. Ellicist's approach is based on literary or academic merit of influences of the texts. Random selections of text samples, currency or the extent to which texts are read, subjective judgment of the typicalness of the text, availability of the text samples in the archives, demographic sampling of reading habits of the people, empirical adjustments of the text selection procedure to meet the linguistic specifications or specializations of a corpus, purpose of the investigators at the time of corpus building. In our argument, the most sensible and pragmatic approach can be the one that combines all these approaches in a very systematic way, and where we can have data from broad range of sources and text types with due emphasis on the features of currency, influentialness, and typicalness. Next feature is simplicity. This feature signifies that a corpus should contain text samples in the simple and plain form so that the target users can have an easy access to the texts without stumbling upon any additional linguistic information marked up within texts. There are many corpora in which text samples are tagged with SGML, standard generalized markup language format, where all markups are carefully used not to impose any additional information on texts. The role of a markup system in relation to text representation is to preserve, in linear encoding, some features which will otherwise be lost in the corpus. The system is perceived quite helpful in the sense that its presence usually does not disturb easy retrieval of original text from the corpus. The basic role of markup processes in relation to text representation is to preserve some additional features which would be useful for various linguistic works. Although these are perceived helpful, Their presence must be recorded separately so that the original text is easily retrievable. The conventions of markup are extendable to various annotations that add information provided for rigorous linguistic analysis of texts. Such information is actually related to organization and interpretations of textual features. Therefore, it varies from analyst to analyst and from purpose to purpose. Simple plain text policy is not opposed to encoding, nor does it oppose the use of some markup conventions. However, we argue that there should be a clear-cut guidelines for the purpose of clarity of texts so that it becomes helpful to distinguish between plain texts and encoded texts. There should be distinctions between the encoding systems also, which are used to annotate only the surface features of text that would otherwise be lost in transfer to a machine, and the encoding system, which is used to encode analysis and interpretations of the original texts. Equality, the new feature. This feature, to some extent, is related to representations. From quantity point of view, each text sample should have equal number of words. That means samples of each text type should possess equal number of tokens collected from various sources. For instance, if each sample of spoken text contains 5,000 words, then each sample of written text should also contain the same number of words to be equal in representation in the texts. This was the norm followed in generation of survey of English usage, where each text sample had almost the same amount of data with respect to the number of tokens. This norm was supported by a general argument that text samples used in corpus should be of equal size. However, there are certain constraints behind such a proposition, which cannot be avoided easily at the time of corpus generation. Number one, the number of variety spoken text is more than the written texts in any living language. So, spoken text may ask for greater or larger representation than written texts. 2. Since collection of data from written sources is easier than collection of data from spoken sources, written text may have greater representation in a corpus. Parity in amount of tokens is a highly deceptive condition, since tokens never occur in equal proportion in each text type. And lastly, equal amount of text cannot be collected from everywhere in a uniform manner, since size of samples varies based on needs of subsequent analysis and use. At present, however, the situation is considerably changed due to the advancement of computer technology. People are least interested to follow the model anymore in this work of corpus compilation. They follow more robust method based on various statistical as well as linguistic models and principles to make a corpus balanced, multidimensional, and representative by way of including texts with varied amount of samples gathered from various sources. Next feature, retrievability. The work of corpus generation does not end with compilation of language data within a corpus. It also involves formatting the text in a suitable form so that the text becomes easily retrievable by end users. That means the text stored in a corpus should be made an easy resource for the users. Anybody interested in text should be able to extract relevant information from the corpus. This redirects our attention towards the techniques and tools used for storing text in electronic format. The present technology has made it possible for us to generate a corpus in personal computer and preserve it in such a way that the users are capable to retrieve and access texts as and when required. This advantage, however, goes directly to those people who are trained to handle language text in computers. Verifiability: text collected from various sources of language use must be open for empirical verification. It should be reliable and verifiable in the context of representing a language under scrutiny and investigation. Until and unless a corpus is free for all kinds of empirical investigation, verification, its importance is reduced to null. Sample texts, which are collected and compiled in a corpus to represent a language or a variety, should honestly register and reflect on the actual use of the language. To address this need, a corpus has to be made in such a way that it qualifies to win the trust of language users or a variety. Users, after verifying the data stored in a corpus, must certify that what has been exhibited in corpus is actually a faithful reflection of the language they use. For instance, if we develop a corpus of the language used in Hindi newspapers, we must pay attention to the event that the data preserved in the corpus qualifies to reflect properly on the language used in Hindi newspapers in its fullest form. The corpus will thus attest authenticity and validity in synchronic and diachronic studies of Hindi in newspapers. Augmentation: a living language is bound to change with time. This is one of the proofs of life and vitality of a language. If a language stops to change with time, it is obsolete or dead. A corpus, which in principle to attest features of a living language, must have the ability to grow with time. It must have facilities to augment with new data, to capture changes reflected in form and content of a language. Therefore, a corpus should continue to grow with time to register linguistic changes noted in a language. Since most of the present-day corpora are synchronic in nature, we should try to make them diachronic so that they grow in parallel with the change of time of language. The feature of augmentation becomes very important weapon for a corpus linguist. This is never reluctant, as he is never reluctant in the work of compiling data from the source language and marked with stamps of time, keeping this view in goal. In fact, the Bank of English, the Bank of Swedish, and many other corpora are adding new language data from English and Swedish and many other languages. For last 2 decades, we have noted that all these corpora are in the process of continuous growth with accumulation of new texts. So this should be done for almost all the corpora which is being developed. Finally, the documentation. Documentation of information of text is a vital part of corpus generation. This information should be stored separately from the texts in corpus. In general, it is necessary to preserve detailed information of source wherefrom text is collected. It is a practical requirement for corpus designers to deal with problems relating to verifications of source text, validation of text examples, dissolving copyright problems. Also, there are other linguistic and extra-linguistic issues relating to sociolinguistic investigation, stylistic analysis, legal inquiries, discourse analysis, etc., which also ask for verification of information of the source documents from which the texts are collected and included in the corpus. The last question, the issue of this features of corpus is management. Management of corpus is a very tedious task. There are always some errors in text to be corrected, some modifications to be made, some improvements to be incorporated. So, at the initial stage of corpus generation, it involves a systematic arrangement of text files based on text types, through which searching of information becomes faster and easier. Generally, the utility of a corpus is enhanced by intelligent arrangement of text files in digital archive. The task of information retrieval from corpus also requires care and sincerity on the part of the corpus designers, so that required files and necessary data are easily retrieved for the target users. Also, systematic arrangement of data makes interdisciplinary research and application work more effective and faithful. Once a corpus is developed and stored, the corpus designers need necessary schemes for its maintenance, standardization, augmentation, and upgradation. Maintenance is needed so that the data is not corrupted by virus infection or damage due to some external effects. Standardization is also required so that a corpus becomes comparable with other corpora developed in and across languages or language types. Augmentation is required to enlarge existing databases with new examples and text samples obtained from new sources. Finally, upgradation is needed so that existing data is converted properly for use in systems and techniques newly available. Since computer technology is changing quite rapidly with time, corpus database needs to be continuously upgraded to be at par with the new system and software, else the whole effort will be ruined. In sum, the process of upgradation of a corpus text involves the following stages. First, preservation of text from computer hard disk in a virus-free condition, transfer of texts from computer hard disk to floppy diskettes, from floppy disk to computer disk, compact disk, or from compact disk to some newly next available storage facilities. Displacement of corpus text from the DOS or disk operating system environment to Windows environment or to a more new environment available for data storage, and conversions of texts from ISCI, that is Indian Standard Code for Information Interchange, to ASCII, American Standard Code for Information Interchange, and from ASCII to Unicode, and from Unicode to some other more user-friendly coding system. In essence, adaptation to new hardware and software technology has to be taken care of with utmost importance. Although the present computer technology is not advanced to perform all these tasks with full satisfaction, we expect that software technology will improve to a large extent to address all these questions, with adequate measures. There is no reason to think that the features discussed here are absolute and non-changeable. These are identified after analyzing the corpora developed so far in various languages. These features are, therefore, more of a general nature than of any specific type. These are open for verification and modification, by which some of the features will be redesigned to address uniqueness of form and content of particular corpus. Also, scholars can identify some features which are not addressed here. Generation of new type of corpus may ask for identification of a new feature which is not discussed here also. Innovation of new technology or application of new principles may result in formation of corpus of new types. In that case, the features which are specified here are open for modification and recasting to fit into the new format of language corpora supposed to be developed in years to come. Thank you.